You mean wish to surrender to me? Very well, accept.
Will you promise not to hurt this man?
May I live 1,000 years and never hunt again.
Fencing, fighting, torture.
Is this a kissing book?
In 1987, while theaters were dominated by action heroes with machine guns and dark, brooding fantasies, Rob Reiner dared to adapt what many considered unadaptable. William Goldman's The Princess Bride.
Why loose your venom on me?
You killed my love.
Picture this: a young Fred Savage, sick in bed, rolling his eyes at his grandfather bringing him a book. "Is this a kissing book?" he asks with all the disdain a young boy can muster. It's a moment that perfectly captures what The Princess Bride was up against. Released in a year that gave us Predator, Lethal Weapon, and RoboCop, here was a film that began with a grandfather reading a story to his grandson. With a modest budget of $16 million, The Princess Bride didn't set the box office ablaze, earning just $30.8 million in its theatrical run. But like the man in black scaling the cliffs of insanity, this film refused to give up. What started as a theatrical underperformer would slowly, through the magic of VHS and cable television, become one of the most beloved films of all time. But why? What makes this kissing book resonate so deeply across generations? The answer lies in how The Princess Bride accomplished something remarkably rare. It created a perfect balance between sincere fairy tale and satirical comedy, crafting a template for modern self-aware storytelling that countless films would try, and often fail, to replicate. This isn't just a story about true love conquering all. It's a story about storytelling itself, about how the tales we share bridge generations, and how sometimes the most powerful way to tell an old story is to acknowledge its familiar beats while infusing them with new life. In an era where cynicism was becoming currency, The Princess Bride dared to be both satirical and sincere, both modern and timeless. Join me as we explore how a story about a farm boy, a princess, a giant, and a six-fingered man became not just another movie, but a cultural touchstone that continues to captivate audiences over 35 years later. Because in a world of disposable entertainment, The Princess Bride proves that some stories, like true love, never die. They just get better with each retelling. Behind the film's effortless charm lies a masterwork of technical achievement and creative problem solving. The cliffs of insanity, those imposing walls of rock that Wesley scales in pursuit of his love, weren't created on a soundstage. They were the real cliffs of Moher in Ireland. Cinematographer Adrian Biddle, fresh off James Cameron's Aliens, brought a storybook quality to these natural wonders, capturing them in angles that made them appear both real and mythical. The sword-fighting sequences, particularly the iconic duel between Inigo Montoya and the Man in Black, took months of preparation. Mandy Patinkin and Carrie Elwes trained for weeks under Olympic fencer Bob Anderson, learning both right and left-handed techniques. What we see on screen isn't movie magic, it's real skill, shot in long takes that showcase the actor's dedication. When Inigo switches hands and declares, "I'm not left-handed," it's not just a great character moment, it's a testament to the film's commitment to authenticity. The Fire Swamp presented its own unique challenges. The production team had to create fire spurts that were both visually impressive and safe for the actors. They developed a system of underground gas jets, carefully timed and controlled, to create those sudden bursts of flame. Rodents of unusual size were brought to life through a combination of men in suits and puppet work, a practical effects approach that gives them a tangible presence that CGI often struggles to achieve. But perhaps the most innovative aspect was the film's frame narrative structure. Rob Reiner didn't just adapt Goldman's novel. He embraced its meta-storytelling aspects. The interruptions by Fred Savage's character aren't just comic relief. They're carefully placed to break tension, provide commentary, and even address plot holes. When the grandson questions why Buttercup isn't trying to escape her captors, he's voicing the audience's own thoughts. The film's visual style strikes a delicate balance between realism and fantasy. Notice how scenes in the grandson's bedroom have a modern, naturalistic look, while the story sequences are bathed in golden light and soft focus, creating a distinct storybook aesthetic. This visual separation helps sell the idea that we're moving between two worlds, the real world and the world of the story. Even the sound design contributes to this dual nature. The story sequences feature a sweeping orchestral score by Mark Knopfler, while the bedroom scenes are notably quiet, grounding us back in reality. It's these technical details, working in harmony, that create the film's seamless blend of fantasy and reality, humor and heart. Perhaps most impressively, all of this was achieved without the benefit of modern digital effects. Every sword clash, every giant's footstep, every miracle pill was created through practical means, giving the film a tangible quality that helps it feel timeless rather than dated. In an age where CGI often overwhelms storytelling, The Princess Bride stands as a testament to the power of practical filmmaking and creative problem solving. At the heart of The Princess Bride's enduring appeal lies its perfectly assembled cast, each bringing something uniquely magical to their roles. Let's start with Mandy Patinkin as Inigo Montoya. What many don't know is that Patinkin approached the role with deeply personal motivation. He had lost his own father to cancer and channeled that loss into Inigo's quest for revenge. When he delivers the famous "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya" speech, it's not just acting, it's catharsis. That's why after 30 years, it remains one of cinema's most quoted moments. Then there's Andre the Giant as Fezzik. Despite battling severe back pain throughout filming, so severe that he couldn't actually catch Robin Wright in the climbing scenes, Andre brought a gentle vulnerability to the rhyming giant. His scenes with Wallace Shawn's Vizzini showcase perfect comedic timing, particularly during the "Anybody want a peanut?" exchange. What's remarkable is that Andre was reading his lines off cue cards due to vision issues, yet managed to make every moment feel natural and heartfelt. Robin Wright, in her film debut as Buttercup, faced the challenging task of making a fairy tale princess feel real. She avoided the typical damsel in distress tropes, instead creating a character with genuine agency and emotion. Her chemistry with Cary Elwes as Wesley is legendary, though interestingly, both were initially nervous about their kissing scenes, leading to multiple takes of their famous reunion kiss. Speaking of Wesley, Cary Elwes embodied both the humble farm boy and the dashing man in black with equal conviction. He performed most of his own stunts, including the majority of the sword fighting sequences. The only time he didn't? When he was actually injured, ironically, not during any of the action scenes, but when Andre the Giant accidentally stepped on his foot during a break in filming. These performances weave together in unforgettable scenes that have become part of our cultural fabric. The sword fight between Inigo and Wesley isn't just technically brilliant, it's a masterclass in character development through action. Every quip, every move reveals something about these characters. The battle of wits between Wesley and Vizzini becomes more than just a clever puzzle. It's a demonstration of how wit can triumph over malice. The Miracle Max scene, featuring Billy Crystal and Carol Kane, almost didn't make it into the film because the crew kept breaking into laughter during filming. Rob Reiner had to leave the set during Crystal's performance because his laughter was ruining takes. Yet this scene, with its perfect blend of comedy and stakes, became one of the film's most beloved sequences. What makes these performances truly special is how they serve the film's larger themes. Every character from Wesley to Vizzini, from Buttercup to Prince Humperdinck, feels both archetypal and deeply human. They honor the fairy tale tradition while gently poking fun at it, creating something that works both as homage and innovation. In doing so, they created characters that don't just entertain us. They remind us why we fell in love with storytelling in the first place. When The Princess Bride first hit theaters in 1987, critics and audiences weren't quite sure what to make of it. The marketing department struggled to position the film. Was it a romance? A comedy? A swashbuckling adventure? This confusion led to mixed reviews and modest box office returns. Variety called it a genial fairy tale, while others dismissed it as too quirky for mainstream success. But something remarkable happened as the film found its way into homes through VHS and cable TV. Like a well-told bedtime story, The Princess Bride grew stronger with each retelling. Parents who discovered it began sharing it with their children. Teenagers quoted it endlessly in high school hallways. College students organized viewing parties. The film that critics couldn't quite categorize became beloved, precisely because it defied categorization. This evolution from theatrical underperformer to cultural phenomenon reveals some fascinating hidden details. For instance, William Goldman, who adapted his own novel, was so nervous about the film's reception that he couldn't watch the filming of the sword fight scene, which would later be hailed as one of cinema's greatest duels. The studio's uncertainty about the film's tone led to multiple marketing campaigns, each targeting different audiences. Some posters emphasized the romance, others the adventure, and still others the comedy. The film's journey also includes some remarkable behind-the-scenes stories that have only enhanced its legacy. Andre the Giant, despite his physical pain, would keep the cast entertained between takes with stories from his wrestling career. During the filming of the fire swamp scene, Robin Wright's dress caught fire, but she remained so professional that she finished the take before letting anyone know. The recovery scene with Billy Crystal as Miracle Max required so many takes because the other actors couldn't stop laughing at his improvised lines. As video stores gave way to DVD and then streaming, The Princess Bride continued to find new audiences. Each generation seems to discover it anew, adding their own layer of appreciation. What started as just another fairy tale movie became a touchstone for discussing everything from true love to revenge, from friendship to political satire. The film that critics couldn't quite figure out in 1987 is now regularly featured in lists of the greatest comedies and romance films ever made. Perhaps most remarkably, the film has achieved something rare in modern cinema. It's become criticism-proof. While viewers might argue about other classic films' merits, The Princess Bride has reached a level of beloved status that transcends traditional critical analysis. It's no longer just a movie. It's a shared cultural experience, a collection of perfectly quotable moments, and a reminder that sometimes the best stories are the ones that don't take themselves too seriously while treating their core themes with absolute sincerity. As far as I'm concerned, that's true love. Today, those words from Peter Falk's grandfather character echo beyond the film itself, representing how The Princess Bride has shaped modern storytelling. Look at films like Shrek, Enchanted, or The Princess Diaries. All owe a debt to how The Princess Bride cracked the code of self-aware fairy tales without sacrificing genuine emotion. The film's influence extends far beyond cinema. Its quotes have become part of our everyday language. Inconceivable! You keep using that word. Political speeches reference the Battle of Wits. Medical students use "mostly dead" as shorthand. Tech companies name their servers after characters. The film has transcended its medium to become a cultural framework, a shared vocabulary that bridges generations and social groups. What makes The Princess Bride particularly relevant today is how it handles cynicism. In an era where ironic detachment often rules, this film demonstrates how to acknowledge genre conventions while still believing in them. When Fred Savage's character gradually stops interrupting the story to complain about the kissing parts, it mirrors our own journey from skepticism to sincere engagement. This balance feels more vital than ever in our current media landscape, where genuine emotion often struggles to break through layers of irony. The film's approach to gender roles, while subtle, was ahead of its time. Buttercup isn't just a damsel in distress. She has agency, personality, and her own journey. Wesley's devotion isn't portrayed as weakness, but as strength. These nuanced character dynamics offer a template for modern storytellers grappling with how to update traditional fairy tale roles while maintaining their mythic power. perhaps most significantly, The Princess Bride reminds us of the enduring power of storytelling itself. In an age of endless content and fractured attention spans, here's a film that celebrates the simple act of sharing a story across generations. It suggests that sometimes the most sophisticated way to tell a story is to embrace its simplicity while acknowledging its artifice. As we look at today's entertainment landscape, filled with reboots, remakes, and meta-commentary, The Princess Bride stands as both pioneer and pinnacle. A film that showed how to reinvent classic storytelling for a modern audience without losing its soul. It proves that true love, whether between characters, between generations, or between audience and story, never goes out of style. And that's the real miracle that Max might have missed. In a world of disposable entertainment, The Princess Bride has achieved the seemingly impossible. It has become not just a classic, but a living classic, one that continues to win new hearts while keeping its old ones. As you watch today's film struggle to achieve the same balance of wit and warmth, you might find yourself wondering, is there a modern film that captures this same magic? That perfect blend of self-awareness and sincerity? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into films that shaped our culture. After all, as Wesley would say, it would be inconceivable not to.
I give it only to the man whom I choose as my husband. Take the fire from my hand.
In 1983, while Return of the Jedi was dominating theaters and captivating audiences, Columbia Pictures released a film that aimed to blend the best of Star Wars with classic sword and sorcery. Krull wasn't just another fantasy adventure. It was a genre-defying spectacle that combined medieval heroism with science fiction elements decades before the MCU would normalize such crossovers. Before Peter Jackson brought Middle-earth to life, before Game of Thrones made fantasy mainstream, there was Krull, a film that asked, what if alien invaders landed on a medieval fantasy world? Ken Marshall stars as Prince Colwyn, whose wedding day is violently interrupted by the Beast and his army of slayers, who kidnap his bride, Lyssa. Armed with the legendary glaive, a magical 5-bladed throwing weapon, Colwyn embarks on a quest to rescue his love from the Beast's teleporting Black Fortress. What makes Krull fascinating isn't just its bold genre fusion, but its remarkable ambition and visual flair. One moment you're watching a traditional quest narrative, the next you're witnessing laser battles and teleportation. Ancient prophecies, Cyclops seers, and fire mares galloping across the sky somehow coexist with alien technology and shape-shifting monsters. This wildly ambitious film required one of the largest sets ever built at Pinewood Studios and boasted early performances from actors like Liam Neeson and Robbie Coltrane. While not a box office sensation, Krull's distinctive vision has earned it a dedicated cult following that continues to celebrate its unique blend of science fiction and fantasy. Today, we're exploring the spectacular world of Krull.
Where's Ergo?
He'll be back soon.
The forgotten film that dared to reimagine what fantasy cinema could be. Krull's premise feels less shocking today in our post-Thor, post-Guardians of the Galaxy world, but in 1983, it was boldly experimental. The film is set on the planet Krull, a world of medieval castles and mystical prophecies that suddenly faces an invasion from space. The Beast and his army of slayers arrive in the imposing Black Fortress, a massive spaceship that teleports to a new location each day at sunrise. Prince Colwyn and Princess Lyssa, members of rival kingdoms, plan to marry and unite their realms. During their wedding ceremony, the Slayers attack, killing the kings and kidnapping Lyssa. The Beast plans to marry her himself, fulfilling a prophecy that their child would rule the galaxy. Colwyn, left for dead, is revived by the sage Inir, who tells him of the legendary weapon called the glaive, a 5-bladed throwing star with magical properties that can defeat the Beast. Colwyn retrieves the glaive from atop a mountain and assembles a band of allies, a cyclops, a magician, a band of escaped convicts, and eventually a shape-shifting creature called a changeling. Together, they must locate the constantly moving Black Fortress and rescue Lissa before the wedding can take place. The genius of Krull's setup is how it seamlessly merges the Chosen One hero's journey with science fiction elements. The Slayers shoot laser beams from their staffs, yet can be killed by swords. The beast is essentially an alien invader, yet operates by rules of prophecy and magic. The story follows classic fantasy tropes, while constantly subverting them with sci-fi elements, creating something that feels both familiar and utterly unique. Krull emerged during the post-Star Wars fantasy boom, but aimed to carve out its own distinctive identity.
Colwyn should have been here by now.
With a staggering budget of $27 million, equivalent to over $78 million today. It was one of the most expensive films produced at that time. A massive financial gamble for Columbia Pictures that demonstrated their faith in director Peter Yates, previously known for more grounded fare like Bullet and Breaking Away. The production was primarily based at Pinewood Studios in England, where some of the largest indoor sets ever constructed were built for the film. The Great Swamp sequence alone occupied Pinewood's famous 007 stage, which had to be flooded for the shoot. The Cyclops character required actors with specific physical attributes and elaborate prosthetics that took 7 hours to apply each day. Writer Stanford Sherman came from television, having worked on Batman and other series, but brought a distinctive mythic quality to Krull's screenplay. The film's visual aesthetic was crafted by production designer Stephen Grimes, who created the distinctive Black Fortress interiors with their organic, almost HR Giger-like quality. The special effects team employed a wide range of techniques, from elaborate miniatures to early blue screen technology. The glaive weapon, which required both practical props and optical effects for its flying sequences, posed particular challenges. Multiple versions were created: rubber ones for safety, lightweight versions for throwing scenes, and detailed hero props for close-ups. The beast's transformations and the fire mares galloping across the sky required cutting-edge optical compositing for the era. Filming proved exceptionally difficult, with the production suffering multiple accidents and setbacks. During the swamp sequence, the massive set caught fire, causing extensive damage and forcing costly rebuilds. The elaborate crystal spiderweb sequence required dangerous stunt work, resulting in several injuries. Actor Bernard Bresslaw, who played the Cyclops Rel, endured not only the lengthy prosthetic application, but also had to act with one eye covered, limiting his depth perception and making physical scenes treacherous. The musical score, composed by James Horner just before his work on Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, would elevate his career, became one of the film's most celebrated elements. His sweeping, adventurous compositions provided Krull with an epic soundscape that many fans consider superior to the film itself. Horner recorded with the London Symphony Orchestra, creating themes that balanced medieval-inspired motifs with more otherworldly science fiction elements, a perfect musical complement to the film's genre-blending approach. British stunt coordinator Vic Armstrong, who would later work on major franchises like James Bond and Indiana Jones, designed elaborate action sequences that required complex wire work and pyrotechnics. The stunt team developed innovative approaches for the Slayers' death scenes, where their bodies crack open to reveal insectoid forms inside. What truly sets Krull apart from its contemporaries is its fearless genre fusion. The film refuses to be categorized, creating a cinematic experience that feels like multiple films colliding in the most imaginative way possible. Medieval castles and alien technology, prophecies and laser battles, mythic quests and teleportation. Krull combines elements that shouldn't work together but somehow form a cohesive world. The visual design deserves special mention. The Black Fortress, with its curved, organic architecture that seems alive, creates an unsettling contrast to the traditional stone castles and forests of Krull. The Slayers themselves, with their metallic armor, insectoid inner forms, and staff weapons that fire energy beams, embody the film's hybrid nature as both fantasy monsters and alien invaders. Krull's most iconic element is undoubtedly the glaive, a 5-bladed throwing weapon that expands from a solid metal star into a floating, controllable weapon. Decades before Thor's hammer or Captain America's shield became cinema staples, the glaive offered a uniquely satisfying weapon that has remained distinctive in fantasy cinema. Its design balanced ancient mysticism with futuristic technology, embodying the film's overall aesthetic. The journey to the Black Fortress incorporates several unforgettable set pieces. A blind seer who can see the future but not the present, crystal spiders spinning webs of living gems, a shape-shifting servant of the beast, and most memorably, fire mares, flaming horses that can gallop across the sky at incredible speeds, leaving trails of fire behind them. Perhaps most unusual for its time was Krull's approach to its love story. While Princess Lissa initially appears to be a typical damsel in distress, the film establishes that she shares a telepathic bond with Colwyn and possesses significant powers of her own. The prophecy states that their union will create a power greater than the beast, making their relationship the actual weapon that will save the world. An approach that was surprisingly progressive for early 1980s fantasy. When Krull premiered in July 1983, it crash-landed at the box office, earning only $16.5 million domestically against its massive $27 million budget, qualifying it as one of the year's most notable financial disappointments. The film found itself competing in a summer dominated by Return of the Jedi, Superman 3, and War Games, established franchises and concepts that overshadowed Krull's more experimental approach. Critical reception proved equally harsh. Roger Ebert gave it a mere 2 stars, calling it a berserk combination of sword and sorcery with interstellar space opera. Variety described it as a sword and sorcery epic that's technically impressive but awfully dull. Most critics found the plot derivative and the characters underdeveloped, while acknowledging the film's visual ambition. What many reviewers misunderstood was that Krull's seeming identity crisis, its refusal to commit to either pure fantasy or science fiction, wasn't a weakness, but its most daring quality. The film wasn't confused about what it wanted to be. It was deliberately creating something new by combining established genres. The film found a second life on cable television and home video throughout the late 1980s, where younger viewers, less concerned with genre boundaries, embraced its imaginative world and spectacular visuals. Fantasy-focused. Magazines and fan communities began reassessing Krull, appreciating its ambitious scope and unique elements that differentiated it from more traditional fantasy films of the era. Krull's initial failure demonstrated the challenges of marketing genre-bending content before audiences were accustomed to such crossovers. Columbia Pictures struggled to position the film, with posters and trailers that couldn't quite capture its unique hybrid nature. The marketing emphasized action and adventure while downplaying the science fiction elements, creating expectations the film couldn't meet in precisely the way audiences anticipated. Despite its troubled reception, Krull's influence has rippled through popular culture in surprisingly significant ways. The film pioneered visual and conceptual approaches that would later become commonplace in both fantasy and science fiction storytelling. Most notably, Krull helped establish the template for what we now call science fantasy. Narratives that freely blend technological and magical elements without feeling obligated to explain their coexistence. This approach can be seen in everything from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe to Star Wars later entries, Marvel's Thor films, and Guardians of the Galaxy. The concept of advanced technology appearing as magic to less advanced civilizations has become a sci-fi staple that Krull explored with unusual visual flair. Krull's impact on video games proves particularly significant. The glaive weapon inspired countless video game weapons, from Insomniac Games' Ratchet and Clank series to Dark Sector's Glaive and Warframe's throwing weapons. The game Golden Axe borrowed heavily from Krull's aesthetic, while the Souls series features multiple weapons inspired by the iconic five-bladed star. World of Warcraft includes several references to the film, including weapons and quests named after elements from Krull. The film's production design influenced fantasy art throughout the 1980s and beyond. The organic, almost biomechanical design of the Black Fortress predated similar approaches in films like Alien 3 and Event Horizon. The distinctive look of the Slayers, humanoid in appearance but revealed to be insectoid creatures inside metal shells, anticipated similar concepts in everything from Power Rangers to Doctor Who. James Horner's musical score has enjoyed a legacy far beyond the film itself. Considered one of his finest early works, themes from Krull appear in film music study programs, and the soundtrack album has received multiple re-releases over the decades. Elements of the score influenced Horner's approach to later works, including his Academy Award-winning score for Titanic. Perhaps most significantly, Krull demonstrated that fantasy filmmaking could be technically ambitious and visually spectacular at a time when most sword and sorcery films relied on modest budgets and limited effects. Its production values and scope helped pave the way for later big-budget fantasy epics like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. Krull's influence extends into tabletop gaming as well, with numerous role-playing games borrowing its aesthetic and concept of blended technology and magic. Games. Workshop's Warhammer 40,000 shares. Krull's approach of placing traditional fantasy elements in a science fiction context. The Fire Mare's concept has been adapted into countless fantasy settings, offering magical mounts that leave trails of flame. The film's cult status has grown particularly strong in digital art communities, where its distinctive visual elements are frequently referenced and reimagined. Modern fantasy concept artists often cite Krull's production design as influential, especially its approach to creating alien architecture that feels simultaneously ancient and futuristic. The Black Fortress design, with its organic, almost living quality, presaged later trends in digital architecture visualization that blur the lines between structure and organism. Krull's legacy also lives on through fantasy filmmakers who discovered it in their formative years. Directors like Guillermo del Toro and James Gunn have cited it as an influence, particularly in their approach to creating fantastical worlds that don't adhere strictly to established genre conventions. The film's willingness to experiment with tone and combine disparate elements resonates with modern filmmakers who increasingly resist traditional genre categorization. Conclusion. Krull remains one of those fascinating cinematic experiments that failed commercially, but succeeded creatively in ways that weren't fully appreciated until decades later. Its audacious blend of medieval fantasy and science fiction no longer seems strange in our current entertainment landscape, where genre boundaries have become increasingly fluid. What makes Krull significant isn't just its visual imagination or technical achievements, but its fearless commitment to creating something unique. It wasn't content to simply clone Star Wars or Conan the Barbarian. It wanted to forge a new path that combined elements of both while adding its own distinctive mythology. The film's very existence challenges the notion that genres should remain separate and distinct. For all its flaws, and there are many from uneven pacing to occasionally wooden performances, Krull possesses an earnest enthusiasm for its world and concepts that remains endearing. It takes its story seriously while still delivering moments of genuine wonder. Fire mares galloping across the night sky, the crystalline beauty of the Seer's Lair, and the ominous majesty of the Black Fortress rising above misty mountains. In many ways, Krull represents both the best and worst of 1980s fantasy cinema. Ambitious, yet derivative. Technically impressive, yet narratively simple. Earnest, yet occasionally silly. Its reputation has grown over the decades, not despite these contradictions, but because of them. It's a perfect time capsule of a specific moment in film history, when studios were willing to take enormous risks on unproven fantasy concepts. If you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten fantasy epics, hit that subscribe button to join our exploration of more underappreciated gems from cinema history. Leave a comment sharing your own Krull memories or other fantasy films from this era you think deserve reappraisal. Until next time, may the power of the glaive be with you. And remember, some fortresses are worth storming, even if they won't stay in one place.
Are you afraid to kiss me, Jack?
I'm afraid you'll break my heart.
And steal your heart? You're dear to me as life itself.
Sunshine is my destroyer.
The sun still shines. We can destroy him.
In the mid-1980s, while Hollywood churned out action spectacles and teen comedies, Ridley Scott retreated into ancient forests to craft something boldly different. Fresh from the dystopian worlds of Alien and Blade Runner, Scott embraced pure fantasy with Legend, a film as visually ambitious as it was commercially misunderstood. Picture a realm where sunlight filters through enchanted woods, unicorns roam freely, and darkness waits at the edges. This was Scott's vision, so uncompromisingly visual it seemed to exist beyond narrative itself. As the Lord of Darkness rises from the depths, horns gleaming against crimson skin, Legend announced itself as something far removed from the practical fantasy of its era. With a substantial $24.5 million budget, Legend arrived at a curious moment after the sword and sorcery boom of Conan, before fantasy found footing again with Willow. The result was a disappointing $15.5 million box office that threatened to relegate the film to a footnote in Scott's career. But like the flickering light in the film's darkest moments, Legend refused to be extinguished.
It's very magic.
Really?
Yes, Jack.
What makes this fairy tale continue to captivate viewers decades later? Scott's unwavering commitment to overwhelming atmospheric beauty, a film that prioritized mood and visual splendor over conventional storytelling. In an era where fantasy reached for accessibility, Legend dared to be ethereal, dreamlike, and unabashedly romantic. This isn't just good versus evil. It's a sensory experience where every frame resembles a pre-Raphaelite painting, where darkness seduces rather than threatens, and where even corruption carries a strange beauty. In an industry defined by formula, Legend stands as testament to artistic vision, even when that vision challenges commercial expectations. Join me as we explore Scott's most misunderstood masterpiece, a dark jewel in fantasy cinema that reveals new facets with each viewing. Because sometimes the most enduring stories are those that dare to prioritize visual poetry over narrative convention, creating a dream from which some viewers never truly wish to awaken. Before CGI-dominated fantasy filmmaking, Legend achieved the impossible through sheer craftsmanship. Cinematographer Alex Thompson, who would earn an Oscar nomination for his work here, painted with light in ways that transformed Pinewood Studios' massive soundstage into a living, breathing fairy tale realm. Each beam of sunlight cutting through the forest mist wasn't a digital effect, but a meticulously placed source, creating what Scott called an illuminated darkness. At the heart of the film's technical achievement stands Rob Bottin's creature designs. After his groundbreaking work on The Thing, Bottin crafted over 50 unique beings for Legend, from the delicate forest sprites to the grotesque goblins. But his crowning achievement was Tim Curry's Lord of Darkness, a towering crimson-skinned devil with 8-foot horns that required 5 hours of daily application and weighed so much that Curry could only film for short periods before needing rest. The forest itself represents perhaps the most ambitious practical set of the decade. Rather than shooting on location, Scott insisted on building an entire woodland ecosystem indoors at Pinewood Studios. Real trees were uprooted and replanted alongside artificial ones. Live grass and flowers were maintained under giant arc lights. The controlled environment allowed for Scott's signature smoke-filled cinematography, but created its own problems, most dramatically when a fire broke out during a lunch break, destroying most of the primary set and forcing a costly rebuild. Perhaps the most fascinating technical aspect remains the film's dual identity through its music. Jerry Goldsmith initially composed a sweeping classical score for European release, while American audiences heard a synth-driven soundtrack by Tangerine Dream. These fundamentally different approaches created essentially two versions of the same film. Goldsmith's lush orchestration emphasized the timeless fairy tale qualities, while Tangerine Dream's ethereal electronics pushed the fantasy into something more dreamlike and modern. What emerges from these technical elements isn't just craft for craft's sake, but a complete sensory world. Legend doesn't just show you fantasy, it envelops you in it, creating an atmosphere so thick with detail and mood that narrative almost becomes secondary to the pure visual experience of journeying through Scott's meticulously constructed dream. At its heart, Legend revolves around three pivotal performances that elevate its simple fairy tale structure into something more psychologically complex. A young Tom Cruise, fresh from the success of Risky Business, but not yet the global superstar he would become, brings unexpected vulnerability to Jack, the forest-dwelling innocent. Casting Cruise against type traded his cocky smile for wide-eyed wonder, gave the film a protagonist caught between boy and man, his journey mirroring the film's transition from light to darkness. What's particularly fascinating about Cruise's performance is how it represents a road rarely taken in his career. The physical demands were immense. He performed his own stunts, including a dangerous ice slide, and spent weeks learning to move with the natural grace Scott demanded for Jack's character. "I wanted him to feel like part of the forest," Scott explained. "Someone who's grown up almost feral among the animals." Cruise's willingness to disappear into this ethereal role, before his action persona solidified, offers a glimpse of an alternate career path the actor might have taken toward more experimental work. Mia Sara, in just her second film role, delivers the story's most nuanced performance as Princess Lily. Her corruption sequence remains the film's psychological centerpiece, a mesmerizing dance with her shadow self that explores temptation with startling sensuality for a PG-rated film. "I wasn't playing two different characters," Sara later explained. "I was playing the same girl discovering parts of herself she didn't know existed." Her transformation from innocent princess to dark seductress and back again provides emotional weight to what could have been a one-dimensional role. The casting process for Lily reveals Scott's meticulous approach. After interviewing nearly every young actress in Hollywood, including Jennifer Connelly and Diane Lane, Scott chose Sara for her combination of classical beauty and emotional complexity. Her preparation involves studying ballet for months to achieve the otherworldly grace Scott envisioned. Ridley wanted Lily to move like she's floating just slightly above the ground, Sara recalled. This attention to physical performance creates a character who seems to exist between worlds, human enough to relate to, yet magical enough to belong in this fantasy realm. But it's Tim Curry who dominates the film as the Lord of Darkness, buried under pounds of prosthetics that require daily 5:30 a.m. application sessions lasting over 5 hours. Curry somehow delivers a performance of surprising subtlety and unmistakable menace. "I couldn't see anything outside the immediate circle of the set," Curry recalled. "It forced me to concentrate entirely on the moment." His seduction of Lily showcases the film's most compelling dialogue, imbuing evil with an eloquence and philosophical depth rarely seen in fantasy villains of the era. The unicorn hunt that drives the plot functions less as narrative and more as mythic symbol. Innocence pursued, corrupted, and ultimately redeemed. Scott frames these creatures with reverence approaching religious awe. When a unicorn is poisoned by darkness's henchmen, the entire natural world responds. Flowers wither, water freezes, and perpetual night falls. This sequence, with its ice crystals forming in real time through practical effects, represents the film's most technically impressive and emotionally resonant moment, a perfect marriage of visual storytelling and mythological significance. Through these performances and set pieces, Legend transcends its simple good versus evil framework to explore deeper themes of innocence, temptation, and the fragile balance between light and darkness that exists in nature and within ourselves. When Legend premiered in April 1985, critics and audiences alike seemed bewildered by what they'd witnessed. The New York Times dismissed it as a beautiful muddle, while Time magazine called it all picture and no motion. With its truncated 89-minute American version featuring the Tangerine Dream soundtrack, many viewers felt they'd seen something gorgeous, but incoherent. The film quickly disappeared from theaters, seemingly destined for obscurity in Ridley Scott's filmography. The initial critical response focused almost exclusively on the film's visual achievements, while lamenting its perceived narrative shortcomings. Roger Ebert, in a 2-star review, wrote, "All of the special effects in the world, and all of the great makeup, and all of the great Muppet creatures can't save a movie that has no clear idea of its own mission and no joy in its own accomplishment." This sentiment echoed throughout most mainstream reviews. Acknowledgement of the film's beauty coupled with frustration at its dreamlike, sometimes disjointed storytelling. What few realized then was that Legend existed in multiple forms. European audiences saw a 94-minute cut with Jerry Goldsmith's orchestral score, while Scott's original vision extended to 125 minutes. Each version offered a substantially different experience, not just in length, but in atmosphere and emotional impact. The Tangerine Dream soundtrack gave American audiences a more contemporary, dreamlike quality, while Goldsmith's score emphasized the timeless, mythic elements Scott had intended. The soundtrack controversy itself became a fascinating subplot in the film's reception. Jerry Goldsmith had composed a majestic, romantic score that perfectly complemented Scott's visual approach. However, after test screenings with younger audiences, Universal Pictures executives pushed for something more contemporary. Enter Tangerine Dream, whose electronic soundscapes fundamentally altered the film's tone. As film music historian Jeff Bond noted, "It's one of the rare instances where you can point to a soundtrack change that transformed not just how a film sounds, but how it feels and what it means." The theatrical marketing campaign further complicated audience expectations. Posters prominently featured Tom Cruise wielding a sword against a backdrop of adventure, while the film itself offered a much more contemplative, visually driven experience. Young audiences expecting an action-packed fantasy in the vein of Conan were instead presented with a methodical, atmospheric fairy tale where visual composition often took precedence over narrative momentum. Over the years, Legend found its audience through home video and late-night television screenings. Fans debated which version was superior, traded bootleg tapes of different cuts, and gradually elevated the film to cult status. The visual references to Jean Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast and the Brothers Grimm tales that casual viewers missed became subjects of passionate discussion among a growing fan base that appreciated the film's artistic ambitions. Fantasy film historian David J. Hogan suggests that Legend suffered primarily from poor timing. It arrived after the sword and sorcery boom had peaked with Conan, but before The Princess Bride showed that fairy tales could be commercially viable again. It was simply too pure a fantasy vision for mid-80s audiences who wanted either action or knowing irony in their genre films. The release of Scott's 114-minute director's cut in 2002 dramatically changed perceptions of the film. Scenes once dismissed as visual indulgence revealed themselves as essential to the story's mythic structure. Moments like Jack's underwater confrontation with swamp hags and extended sequences in Darkness's lair restored the narrative coherence many critics found lacking. With Goldsmith's original score reinstated, the film finally achieved something approaching Scott's original vision. Film critics began reassessing Legend in light of this more complete version. The AV Club's Keith Phipps wrote, "Seen now, Legend looks less like the failure it was branded as upon release, and more like a film ahead of its time. One that dared to take fantasy seriously when the genre was still considered childish escapism." Similarly, Empire Magazine's retrospective review awarded the director's cut 4 stars, noting, "This is the Legend Scott intended, mysterious, menacing, and unabashedly romantic." Nearly 4 decades after its release, Legend stands as the last great pre-CGI fantasy epic, a handcrafted world of practical effects, physical sets, and makeup artistry that feels increasingly precious in our digital age. Its influence extends far beyond its initial commercial impact, casting a long shadow over fantasy filmmaking that continues to this day. Guillermo del Toro has repeatedly acknowledged Legend as a formative influence, with the aesthetic DNA of Scott's film clearly visible in Pan's Labyrinth and Hellboy. The creature designs, particularly the majestic horns and crimson skin of Darkness, have been referenced and reimagined countless times, from Dave Harbour's Hellboy to Disney's Maleficent. When modern filmmakers seek to create fantasy with genuine visual weight and presence, they often return to the techniques pioneered in Legend. Within Ridley Scott's diverse filmography, Legend occupies a curious position. Often overlooked in discussions dominated by Alien, Blade Runner, and Gladiator, it nonetheless represents his most uncompromising artistic statement, a film where his background as a visual artist and his meticulous attention to atmospheric detail found their purest expression. Scott himself has acknowledged the film represents his most complete vision of a world beyond our own. For contemporary viewers, Legend offers something increasingly rare, fantasy that doesn't explain itself, that trusts in the power of images to convey meaning, and that allows symbols and archetypes to resonate on an almost subconscious level. In an era of exposition-heavy world building, its confidence in visual storytelling feels refreshingly bold. The film assumes a visual literacy many modern fantasies no longer expect from their audience. Perhaps most importantly, Legend reminds us that fantasy at its best isn't about escape, but about confronting fundamental human truths through metaphor and myth. The eternal struggle between light and darkness, innocence and experience, played out on Scott's mist-shrouded sets, speaks to conflicts that remain eternally relevant. When Darkness proclaims, "There can be no light without darkness," he articulates the film's central philosophy, that these opposing forces define and need each other, existing in eternal balance. As new generations discover Legend through streaming services and special editions, they find a film that rewards patience and attention, revealing new details and depths with each viewing. In a landscape dominated by franchise filmmaking, its singular vision stands as testament to fantasy's power to create worlds that feel genuinely otherworldly, rather than simply familiar stories in exotic settings. What other visually stunning fantasy films deserve a second look? What forgotten gems prioritize atmosphere over conventional plotting? Let me know in the comments below and subscribe to join our journey through cinema's most beautiful and misunderstood masterpieces. Because in a world of disposable entertainment, films like Legend remind us that sometimes true artistic vision requires time to be fully appreciated, and once discovered, becomes impossible to forget.